the latest news with the Prime Minister? Let me see if I could find it. Let me share my screen because today we want to go through. I want to go through the syllabus. Is this the syllabus? Poorest Caribbean. There we go. And I want to go through the syllabus with you guys today. Let me share my screen. Share my screen with you, Caribbean. Just it.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Danielle. How are you?
So sorry, I could not respond earlier. I'm driving. So I'm just able to respond now because I'm off the business. But I'm good, thank you. And just letting you know, I'm here still, but I am driving.
Okay.
Oh.
All right. But how I have anybody? I know Gavion said she can't. Gavion can't make it, but I know there are others. I know there is Matthews not here. I don't know what's going on with him. Anybody know why the other students aren't here?
Good evening. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Felmin. How are you?
Tired, but I just pick up my daughter from school and I'm going to the doctor directly with her now. So busy, and tired.
Oh wow. Well, today we wanted to go. We have a lot to cover.
Yes.
Hopefully we can get to cover what we need to cover. Actually, let me. There we go. That's better. All right. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Great. By the way, last week I asked you guys questions about first generation American, second generation. I don't think I answered the question. If I'm originally from Jamaica and I came to the US, became a natural citizen and have kids, what would my kids be considered first, second, third, or fourth generation Americans? Some of you said first, some said second. The answer would be they'll be considered first generation Americans because they would be. I'm the original. I'm the original. So the original, and I wasn't born here. I came from somewhere. So I'll be the original, and whatever stems from me will be the first generation of Americans. But that's in relation to. I asked that question in relation as a brain teaser, and in relation and as it relates to connections or thread. I think connections and threads are very important because it helps to establish. It helps to establish one's identity. Your roots is very important. And if you study the U.S. and the Americas, there are roots all over the Caribbean that goes far back to the Caribbean and to Africa. And so it's important. We're studying Caribbean, but the study of the Caribbean does not exclude the connections that we have as part of a whole. Okay, as part, and we talk about the New World, the Caribbean as part of the New World, the West Indies as part of the New World. We talk about one of the things that connects people of the New World and people of the Caribbean is the Christopher Columbus, or the arrival of the Europeans to the Caribbean, and the fact that people's and the transatlantic experience of bringing people from Africa to the Caribbean. But not just that, in the 1800s when slavery was abolished, especially within the English-speaking Caribbean, we find that many slaves left the plantations, and as a result, because of that, they had to bring people from indentured laborers, bond servants, we call them, bond servants. They weren't necessarily slaves, but in a sense they were slaves. They were bonded over a period of time to work off to work off their debts or to work off whatever crime they had committed or whatever the case might be. So they worked off their debt, and so people from India and people from China came to the Caribbean, especially in the 1800s or the 1860s. There was a lot of people that came. So and if you study the dynamics or the peoples throughout the Caribbean, look the people who live in Suriname, the people who live in Jamaica as against those in Barbados, and a lot of the plantocracy remained in Barbados after independence and slavery was abolished. A lot of the plantocracy, so they talk about a lot of mixture, browning, the complexity of the people that live in Barbados. A lot of brown people in Trinidad and Tobago. You find it's a 50% African, 50% of Indian heritage. But we talk those questions. So anyway, I asked those questions because it's very important once we begin to study Caribbean as part of the New World. Today's class, we want to quickly look at the syllabus. Just so you know, class 1 and class 2. Class 1 will be available later on today, probably within about an hour or two. Class 1 will be available. It's about 34 minutes. It's available on the YouTube feed on Caribbean Thought Lectures. And I post a link to the YouTube lecture series on the JTS online platform. So if you go to Caribbean Thought to the JTS online platform and click on and look at the resources, you will see where I click the link to the YouTube lecture series of previous classes, and the one that the last two that we did. One will be available today, the other one will be available probably later on this evening or by tomorrow. This class today won't be available until probably Sunday, or depending on how quickly we can get it out. But I'm gonna ask you to just watch the videos of the classes and so on, just to keep abreast of what's going on. But today's class, and by the way, we're gonna quickly go through the syllabus because I think I need to do that. 1 and 2, I want to but I actually prepared a lecture for today's class, and it is available in academia.edu. I have a tendency of writing and posting the writings up on my feeds and so on, so because I believe in making popular what was the monopoly. So students and anybody who wants to learn and empower their minds and themselves can have access to the materials. Okay, so if you go to my ResearchGate page, it's available. If you go to academia.edu, it's available. But it's also available at if you go to JTS Online and you click on the week 2 or week 3 lecture, it's available as well, the actual lecture presentation with references and links. But we're going to go through, hopefully we'll be able to go through the entire document or the lecture that I have prepared for you today. But first, let us look at the syllabus. Let's go through the syllabus real quickly. Of course, the course is called Caribbean Thought. It's part of Caribbean. We do Caribbean Studies, but I don't want you to think of it as Caribbean Studies. It's broader than Caribbean Studies, okay? Because notice the word thought, Caribbean Thought, okay? Because so it's not just, we're not doing social studies. We're doing higher level thinking. We're doing critical thinking into what pertains to Caribbean study. We could be studying the study of Caribbean study or the discipline of Caribbean study, okay? But the course is Caribbean Thought, and it's a 2200 level course. That's very important. The level is important. It could be a 1000 level course. It's kind of introductory, but it's not necessarily introductory. It's a 2nd or 3rd level course, and it provides 3 credits. If we're to describe the course focuses on and explores the diverse currents of Caribbean thought, which have influenced the development of Caribbean societies. Again, we are studying diverse currents, and I like the word currents and the word diverse. Okay, because when we look at Caribbean, we can't look at it as a monolithic entity. Okay, but the Caribbean as a diverse entity, irrespective of the fact that we all have this transatlantic African heritage, but there is also now we are going to be looking at also the indigenous heritage of the Aboriginals, the Taino people, the heritage or the hybridized heritage stemming from the mixture or the admixture of European cultures as well, to what we have today. But we're studying diverse currents, diverse peoples and thinkings of Caribbean thought, which have influenced the development of Caribbean societies, from colonialism to independence and beyond. Well, it says from colonialism, which started from when Christopher Columbus discovered the Caribbean in 1492, between 1492 and 1494, to the Caribbean. We're not just talking about Jamaica. So we're talking about, but from colonialism, but it could be from before that, when the Spanish came. So are we talking about 1492? Or are we talking about 1565 when the British came here? Okay, are we to study it from the Arawaks, from even prior to colonialism, what pertains? Because we talk about the Caribbean being an invention, and I said the Caribbean today, what the Caribbean today stems from what happened in the 1960s of independence, or probably, but from before that, from colonization, from the 1400s, okay, or from the 1500s, or even before that, when the Taino people, the American Indians, traversed this land. But and I talk about the fact that the Caribbean represents a place that is hybridized and diverse. I think if you go to I said that is this it? In the course outline, the course focuses and explores the diverse currents of Caribbean thought, which have influenced the development of Caribbean societies from colonialism to independence and beyond. It traces the history of resistance. And examines the quest for equality and the challenge of defining Caribbean identity within this post-colonial and neoliberal globalized world, not just within the geographic sense, but also in terms of a diaspora. It will challenge you students to develop and express your own critical thinking as a Caribbean people within a unique way that helps to realize and further develop and further the hope of a free, independent Caribbean that is bursting with hope and opportunity. But of course, the course understands that it requires that students begin to critique and explore their own thinking, your own thinking, in deeply esoteric and critical ways that deconstructs history and philosophy. So at the end, you will create your own Caribbean thought, leading to a Caribbean academic journal of young academic and future scholars. So the course will make you estranged from self, but it is geared towards getting you out of your bubble and to consider issues that will make you uncomfortable. There's one other thought that I have to bring up here, which I made an announcement earlier, which I wanted to share something that I wrote some time ago. Here we go. Because I asked, one of the questions that we're going to consider for the course is, what is the Caribbean? What is the Caribbean? The course, we will have to ask that question. What is the Caribbean? Okay? And if you read my introduction on the JTS online platform, you hear me say that this is my 6th time teaching the course, and it will continue to explore diverse currents. But in addition to that, in addition to focusing on the development of Caribbean societies and peoples, because in looking at diverse currents, we're looking at the development of Caribbean societies and peoples and the impact of the past on our present experiences, and to reimagine a better future if the current one still requires change. The course will most definitely consider the foundations of knowledge and how this has evolved into the human dynamic that create the Caribbean position. I said that life is about people and how people relate. Life is about people and how people relate. Yet, there are those people who have made life out of something that it is not. Yeah, in fact, okay. Actually, let me go to the statement that I'm referring to. I can't remember the statement, but if I could bring it up here, nah, that's not what it is. I'm trying to find a statement about life that I had wrote some time ago, which I think it's worthwhile sharing here about life.
Okay, sir, I don't want to break your train of thought,
Go ahead.
but that was a very strong statement.
About what? About what? What
People
statement?
people making life something that life is not. Like that is such a loaded statement. So if you can, I would like you to expound on what you mean.
Yes. Hold on. I'm trying to find. I'm writing. It's part of a writing that I'm doing, but I said something to that effect. Hold on. Let me expound on that some more for you. Okay, here we go. That made this thing so different. I'm sorry. Hold on a second. I'm trying to find it. Here we go. What? Let's pause this. They've made this thing so different now. Okay, fine. Let me go to another page. Let's go to let's go to this. Here we go. Let's go to. I want to say it back to exactly how I've written it, because how I've written it is quite profound. Which where is it? Here we go. I think it's on this. This is what I've said. I have said that life is about people and how people relate. Yet life is what we make it or allow others to make of it for us, thereby creating privileges. Let me say this again. Life is about people and how people relate. Life is about people and how people relate. That's very important. Yet, life is what we make it or allow others to make of it for us, creating privileges. And that's a very important point, because I make that point because I'm going to talk to you about later on about the Black position. We talk about the Caribbean being an invention. We talk about classes in society. We talk about the strategy of globalization and the ceremonies of independence. The former prime minister, the foreign minister of South Africa recently made a statement which I carried in one of our shows some time ago, and in an editorial, and I'm including it in a book, talking about Pharisicalism, the issue of, and that's what we talk about in neoliberal globalization, Reconsidered, the issue of Pharisicalism, okay? The issue of looking at society and how society is created, the issue of institutions and institutionalism, which we're going to get into in this class when we begin to talk about critical thinking. And that is why critical thinking is important. It is a recognition that what we see today and the society we live in is a society that is created, okay, created in a certain way that allows for certain people to enjoy certain privileges, which continues in an historical fashion today. And institutions such as church, such as school, such as intellectualism, societal institutions are created to continue a kind of knowledge, to continue a kind of life, to continue the status quo. And if you study society, if you go to, say for example, talk about the constitution of a society is important. Britain does not have a constitution because they have certain norms and values that they follow, but it's a monarchical society based on rules and privileges and so on and so forth. So when we study society and when we start to look at the problem of realizing truth, the problem of anything, and I have this book here today, Antonio Gramsci, Prison Notebook. He said, this is a very important book. He said in the book, in his Prison Notebook, he said, the central argument of Gramsci's essays on the formation of the intellectuals is simple. The notion of the intellectuals as a distinct social category, independent of class, is a myth. All men are potentially intellectuals in the sense of having an intellect and using it, but not all are intellectuals by social function. Intellectuals in the functional sense fall into two groups. Antonio Gramsci, in his Prison Notebook, does not believe in an intellectualism that is based in nurture. It is based on nature. And the point I make about life is what you make it. If you read the book, I referenced this last class. Kant says that history is a result of the varieties of human natures and circumstances. In other words, the history of man, as purported by man, is written by a man within a milieu that projects his posture. I say to people, when you study the Bible was written at a time that promoted masculinity over any other sex. The male was dominant. It was written within a masculine frame. And you know, when you study, some of you who study Bible and theology, and so when they talk about hermeneutics, looking at the context of anything, you study the context. And when you start to study various societies and how societies change from epochs to epoch, you find that human natures or circumstances, whatever is happening in the day, or whatever is the driving or winning point of the day, becomes the institutional framework that all must subscribe to, without question. But when we say that life is about people, because indeed, that's what life is. Life is about people and how people relate. And if you study society today and the dynamics of society, I talk about what is the Caribbean in relation to the global North and the global South. In other words, and we talk about what is the black position in the world. The black position in the world, okay, is one of lack, the one of dependency. And wherever you find black people is one of lack. And and Walter Rodney wrote the book How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. Europe today how Africa was underdeveloped by Europe. And if you study African societies today, or a lot of African societies today, it is made within the molds of the former master. Okay, and the dynamics, the way in which people relate in society, how classes relate, the upper classes, the middle classes, and the lower classes. The fact that the way in which we look at society, and in Jamaica, we find there's a class is based on one's education, okay, education or occupation, but but all internal economy, all internal societies, okay, have, even within the black community in the US and in post-industrial communities, there is still an occupational class, but there is still also a browning, yes, a racial complexity that determines one's proximity to wealth and to status. Okay, but I said to you, life is what people make it. Life is about people and how people relate in that society. But the relationship in society is not based on nurture, it's based on human nature. It is you, it is I that have come to create society. And I said to people, what people have done, people create huge walls put up huge walls in their life that they can't even jump over. And that creates complexity and problems. Many people commit suicide. The problems that we have in society today also stems from what we have made of life. We have made life so complex. Yes, Jesus said at one point, "Give to Caesar what is due unto Caesar." Okay, recognizing that the life that we are living and what we are called to live, well, it is as if we are living it as unto man, which has nothing to do with any created or space. We talk about man-made life, the life that we have. And then we said that what men have done throughout history, if throughout history, is that they have created life, and then what they have done is before the Renaissance and the Reformation, they appealed to God. In other words, their position, monarchical power was based on a birthright that came down from God. They appealed to theology. But as society changes over time, when now men appeal to science, how educated you are, how well versed you are in science and technology will determine your ability and your position in life. But anyways, that's not what I'm on. Okay, that's not what I don't want to go off tangent here because we have a lot to cover. But we will get back into that when we talk about life is what you make it or allow others to make of it for you. Life is what you make it. Life is how people relate. Okay? Life is how people relate. Life is what you make it and how you relate in that. How your relationship now, and also once you understand that, then you will understand that you can allow others to make of it for what it is not or what it is. But we'll talk about that later on. But we will explore that as we get into the course. The course surveys the history and philosophy of the Caribbean and the ways in which the Caribbean has emerged as a society in the shadow of colonialism and the emergence of neoliberal globalization. I use the word neoliberal globalization a lot. We'll talk about that. I won't talk about it now, but neoliberal globalization, because I'm going to talk about the fact, and the book that our textbook talks about neoliberal globalization. The irony of globalization was that when we got independence, when Caribbean countries, when we were getting independence, what was happening at the time in the 1960s? We were speeding towards globalization. We were speeding towards globalization, and I call that the irony of globalization, of freedom and independence. The irony. And if you know what, if you guys study irony is very important. Okay, the opposite of something, the irony of, because when little did they know, when you study irony, little did these nationalists know, little did the nationalists know what was happening. They are clamoring for independence. What kind of independence? An independence of sovereign nations and states. Okay. They were clamoring for a nation of borders where they have their own government of the people, by the people, within their own locale. But what was happening in the world in the 1960s and 70s? The world is moving towards globalization. And in order to facilitate globalization, nationalist thinking have to give way to that kind of, because globalization involves the crossing of borders, but we also recognize that we live in what? A competitive world. We live in a what? A competitive world. The world was always about competition. From colonialism, it was about competition. Europe, all the European countries they were racing to find gold. They were racing to become the most dominant country. They were racing to be the dominant country in sugar. Yes? What was going on in Africa? They were also competing because all the African countries, they were competing against each other. And I'm not going to use the word tribe. I'm going to use the word country. Or the African peoples, they didn't consider themselves Africans in the sense that because there was no race. Before the concept of race, Africans didn't consider or think in terms of race. Okay? They thought in terms of nation. And they all competed, and the opportunity to outduel and outmaneuver the other tribe was salacious to them. When the Europeans came and put to each African nation the idea of give us slaves that you get from the other African tribes, and we'll give you guns, and you'll be able to dominate Africa. And they said, wow, this is great. Yes, but the thing is, it was strategic. The deal that was struck between Europe or the European country and the African country was struck between all this. So that's what created pandemonium in Africa, you know, because they promised all these African nations guns, and they all got guns, fighting against each other, trying to get slaves to give to the Europeans, and they wanted the best slaves. They wanted the best slaves. They wanted the kind of slaves that the Europeans said that the kind of slaves that they wanted from Africa were Africans or slaves, people who could survive the transatlantic, because the transatlantic was rough and it was tough. That's the kind of slaves that they wanted coming to the New World. The brightest, the most brilliant slaves. That's the kind of slaves that they wanted. So the Europeans went to Africa and made one deal with one African nation, and then the same deal that they made with that African nation went and made another deal with another African nation, and then another African nation, and another African nation. And if you read Walter Rodney's How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, that was one of the ways in which Europe underdeveloped Africa, and also one of the ways in which they brought Africans from Africa to the New World and to the Caribbean in the 1600s. Of course, prior to the 1600s, slavery wasn't as elaborate, because there was no transatlantic slave period when Christopher Columbus first came to the New World in the 1400s. The transatlantic started in the 1600s. That was when And it wasn't until between late 1500s into the 1600s that people start talking about race. But there is no concept of race before the 1500s. The concept of race coincided with the justification for Europe wanting to engage in the most heinous project, was to enslave a whole nation of people by first redefining them as property, redefining them as nobodies, as devils and demons, without sophistication, without religion. And when you study power, that's what power does. That's what people who tend to control, they redefine you as something else in order to manipulate you. Redefining the other as, and that's ethnocentrism as well. That's when you study ethnocentrism, or when you look at when you look at what ethnocentrism is, that's what ethnocentrism is. Devaluing the other based on your value, making a value judgment about somebody else. And that's what has come. And when you look at the Caribbean today, and when you look at parts of Africa today and the world, there is the Europeanization of the New World, in a sense. We talk about this Britishness. Louise Bennett talk about this Britishness. Okay? Of this, okay, and one's ability to be able to speak European. The more fluent you are in European language, European ways, European traditions, even within the African milieu, it's the more accepted you are, in a sense. That is what has come to define Caribbean and Caribbean societies as well. And Homi Bhabha talks about that in her book, The Location of Culture, and Homi Bhabha is a post-colonialist, and is somebody that we must study when you study Caribbean thought, although she's from India. But when you start to look at the Indian context, you find that when you start to study the Commonwealth, there is this commonality in the Commonwealth. But the course surveys the history and philosophy of the Caribbean and the ways in which the Caribbean has emerged as a society in the shadow of colonialism and the emergence of neoliberal globalization. And I'm going to talk about, I can't wait to get to this topic when we start talking about the irony of globalization and how the Caribbean, it's important that we study history. They say that if you don't know where you're coming from, then you're going to make the same mistakes. And if I ask you what is the Caribbean today, yes, we are not competitive. Economically, we're still developing. We have had missed opportunities. There's high crime and violence. We are united, but we are not as united in the kind of unity that is required in order for us to be competitive in the world. We talk about the Bandung Conference in the the Bandung Conference was what, in 1955? That was the Bandung Conference, when all the non-aligned global South countries, the colonial countries, all the nationalists, they all came together at this big conference with the dream of the nation, of everybody having an independent nation. But little did they know what was discussed in 1944, after World War II, when all the post-industrial countries came together to create a new world order in their eyes, of which the Caribbean is a part. Part of that world order saw the development of the IMDb, the World Trade Organization, and and the idea and the policy of structural adjustment that has helped to create the indebtedness of many Caribbean countries, that has allowed for penetration. And I'm going to talk about later in the lecture today, the issue of penetration is very important. Penetration, that is, okay, you think about it in sexual terms. Okay, who is being penetrated and who is doing the penetration? And when you start to study the economics and the societies of the global south, of which the Caribbean is a part, as against the global north, and you start to understand Caribbean position, and the history of the Caribbean, you started to look at it in terms of our penetration and, okay, our pregnability and the global north impregnability and the strategy of facade that went into making us penetrable. I remember one time we're talking about export. Okay, we talk about the World Trade Organization, and it was easy to export. You know, we talk about exporting stuff. It was easy. We had to meet several criteria in order to export goods to the big country. But goods coming from the global north to the global south never had such criteria. We were part of a global strategy involving the World Trade Organization, okay, succumbing to certain rules that says you can't have unfair competition by investing in the local economy, by subsidizing your manufacturers and so on and so forth. But they were doing it in the big country, and they were already ahead. The Caribbean just coming into its own, setting a path of development, must now lock itself into agreements with other countries that were already developed and advanced. That makes no sense. Anyway, but we talk about that. The course examines the central ideological currents of 20th century political thought in the region and covers broad topics such as colonialism, nationalism, Pan-Africanism, socialism, Marxism, feminism, democratic socialism, neoconservatism, neoliberalism, globalization, deconstructivism, critical race theory, strategy, and the foundations of knowledge and the hegemony of faith, economic inequality, and poverty. You know, I said to all my previous classes that when I told one of my advisors, Martin Oppenheimer, that I was teaching this course at Jamaica Theological Seminary, he was shocked. He said, "You are teaching an activist course like this, a course that is about critical thinking and skepticism?" I'm like, yes. Because we are in the Caribbean and we are affected by discriminatory tactics in the world. When you start to study the Rastafari movement, it was a response, okay, to discrimination. It was a response to an affront, which was Rastafarianism started in the 1930s, but it was a response to colonialism and control. We'll talk about that. Among the thinkers and works that will be considered throughout the course are Marcus Garvey, George Padmore, C.L.R. James, V.S. Naipaul, West Benjamin, Michel Foucault, Frantz Fanon, Walter Rodney, Fidel Castro, Michael Manley, Edward Seaga, Bob Marley. Bob Marley just had a new movie that was just released recently. Kamal Brathwaite, Edward Glissant and the Negritude Movement, Homi Bhabha, Mike Davis, Nelson and Novella Keith, Stephanie Black, Jamaica Kincaid, Garnet Roper, Rex Nettleford, and of course the professor's work, which is yours truly. Themes will be drawn from a selection of contemporary newspaper columnists, talk show hosts, and ideas behind the major international agencies and institutions which have shaped post-independence policies. The selection of thinkers and social movements to be examined will vary with each semester. Now, the course also looks at the role of music. I don't know if you're going to get much time to look at that, but music is very important. And when you look at, many people look at Bob Marley as iconic. as a musical sensation, but to be honest, Bob Marley was a prophet. He was a prophet for his religion, Rastafarianism. Okay, so you have the Christian religion with its gospel and Christian music and its prophets. Bob Marley, in a sense, was seen as in a sense, well, not in a sense, he was a prophet, and who preached the message and the dogma and the doctrine of his faith. That was his religion. That was his faith. And music plays a very important role in when you study society, in Caribbean society. Even music was also a part of resistance, the struggle for independence. Okay, it was therapy as well, and it was escape. The arts and sports in carrying the spirit of resistance and in shaping and defining Caribbean identity. Louise Bennett was what Louise Bennett's poem, and her poem was revolutionary. It can be seen as her kind of resistance because she moved away from the periphery, from the center, to embracing the periphery. In other words, non-traditionalist ways of speaking, non-traditionalist ways of doing poetry and literature. When people eschewed and looked down on Caribbean vernacular and patois, she embraced it in her performances. That was her resistance, okay? Carrying Caribbean language and so on. And of course, so yeah, it's important to study the arts and music and sports. And in fact, if you study West Indies cricket, when you study West Indies cricket, and how study and you look at the leadership in West Indies cricket, who could be captain and who couldn't, and it wasn't for years. You have great West Indian players, okay, but you couldn't be captain if you weren't brown skin or if you weren't white, okay. Okay, you study that kind of a thing. You talk about V.S. Naipaul, and Homi Bhabha talks about V.S. Naipaul in his writing, and how his stories, the characters in his books were like in Abyss Wall and so on. And we're going to reference some of his books, V.S. Naipaul's books. How these books, these literary genius moved away from the center to embracing the periphery, using language, tropes, images, characters that weren't the usual characters you've seen in books and the kind of language you will see. The course examines the role of the collective Christian presence and suggests a public theology priority for the church in the region, but also considers opportunities that takes advantage of science and technology and leveraging social media and digital technology as a way to express these critical thinking and ideas. Well, that particular last part I added. I don't know if I added that part because I believe that as people doing critical thinking, we have to also provide ourselves with a platform to share our thoughts and to have dialogue and conversation, and we have to take advantage of new technology, AI technology. What are our goals and the outcomes? Students will have an understanding of the outline of Caribbean history and slavery to the colonial period. I sent each of you and included on the platform an outline that traces Caribbean, beginning with Arawaks to African. Beginning with the Arawaks to Africans, and at some point we will peruse the document and we will go through it quickly. But that's a very important resource for you guys to have and to read and to explore and to do further readings, because that's just an outline. You can take the outline now and do more further reading from the outline I sent you guys. I sent you an outline, and I think you guys may have had it you may have gotten it. Let me know if you haven't. That traces Caribbean thought and Caribbean thinking, but you'll have an understanding of that. You should already have an understanding of that from the document we sent to understand the impact of that history on current reality. We talk about when you study Caribbean, how far back do you go? Do you start in the 1960s or do you start before that? And I say to you, the Caribbean is part of the New World. The Caribbean is part of an invention. Must begin with the inventor. The civilization within which the Caribbean is. We are in the Western civilization, driven by European thought that has been influenced by the Greco-Roman world. So so even now at Georgetown, where I am studying the foundations of knowledge, looking at starting from Seminary and Mesopotamia, and of course, and also reading books like Homer's Iliad, and moving into Augustine, and how Augustine writing was periphery, but it became central as ideas about God became sophisticated, and people became developed, and the church became an institution because there was no institution. The church became institutionalized. The church developed a Roman identity because it was competing for dominance with other faiths. So it found normative other writings that would support its dominance and its preeminence and privilege over any other. And that is institutionalism. That's what institutions are for. Okay. And even with the church, with its privileging of itself and the posturing of itself over other. The church has also came to support slavery and have also helped to engender a bias within brainwash within Caribbean people, within Caribbean people, so that they look down on their own Afro-Caribbean beliefs, which we will study in this course as part of our research paper. So we want to understand the impact of that history. The impact of our colonial history is one where we have where our own history, where our own identity has been looked down upon by our own selves. Well, say for example, nothing black not good, and can I tell you, nothing black is still not good. Because when you start to study, when you start to ask people and to have reflections among Caribbean people about revivalists, you know, when I used to walk in Britain to look for one of my friends, and I used to notice a house with candles and cloth, and they said they were revivalists, and we were afraid of them because we thought they were associated with doppies and walk across the street. The way how we treat people who embrace Afro-Caribbean belief, we would look down on Rastas. We see them as dirty, and Rastafarianism as a fringe group. People who don't have a very good command of the English language. Okay, we look down on, you know, we talk about that kind of thing. The education system is one that promotes the traditionalist view, as what Homi Baba talks about the tradition. And when he got into Oxford, it was the best, it was the highest thing, the greatest achievement, the ability to be able to get into a former colonial master school was the greatest achievement that one could have. And it speaks to the lasting endurance of this colonial heritage that continue to treat the other as better than ourselves, the foreigner as better than ourselves. That continues to, we talk about, I asked the question, Frantz Fanon says in his famous writing, in Black Skin's White Mask, the Negro is not any more than the white man. That was from the 1950s. Does it still pertain today? Yes, it does. Because even within the own Negro, he is not. He still sees himself or things that come from him or his heritage as less than. We have to understand the impact of that history, the impact of history on current reality through debt, through structural adjustment. Understand and appreciate the influence of key historical and current figures. That's important. We have to understand and appreciate the influence of key historical and current figures. Say, for example, understand Frantz Fanon, understand George Padmore, understand Marcus Garvey, understand Michael Mann. Say, for example, Fidel Castro. I really thought that Fidel Castro was a terrorist. I really thought some of these nationalists and socialists were terrorists and crazies. They were crazies. Because of the kind of education system that we have, a European, Eurocentric education system that continues to promote, that continues to redefine people's struggles and fight for resistance as terroristic. Say, for example, I say to you what's going on in South Africa. Nelson Mandela was jailed. He was fighting against apartheid and he was jailed. Okay? Where was the world in all of this? We talk about life is what you make. Life is about people and how people relate. We talk about Haiti and we talk about Togo. Togo got independence, but they wanted their independence on their own terms and they wanted to create a country that almost resembled the Swiss. The French would have none of it and did everything in their power, okay, by setting up other governments to fight against the other government, the local government. Yes, by asking them to pay huge sums of money in order for their independence to be recognized, and later on, when that didn't work, they assassinated the leader, and installed their own leadership. The same thing happened in Haiti. The same thing happened in Grenada. The same thing would have happened in Jamaica. Okay, we talk about life is what you make it or what you allow others to make of it. We talk about, I'm going to ask you the question, what is the difference between Cuba, Haiti, as against Jamaica, Trinidad, and Barbados? What's the difference? What's the difference? What's the difference? I'm asking you guys, what's the difference? When you look at Cuba and Haiti, and you compare that with Jamaica, Trinidad, and Barbados, what's the difference? Huh? When you look at them, when you look at the economies of these places, Jamaica, compared to Cuba and Haiti, Jamaica, Trinidad, and Barbados are economically better off than these other countries. Their independence is recognized. They are fairly involved in the world, on the world stage. Haiti and Cuba, not so much. Why? Why is that the case? Let's study the independence. What kind of independence? How did Cuba get their independence? As against, how did Jamaica, Barbados, and Trinidad and Tobago get their independence? When you study how these countries, these groups of countries got their independence and what pertains today, you will understand the point I'm making, the correlational value. The argument I'm making is a refreshing and remarkable one. It's a new one. It's quite remarkable. The point I'm making here. It's quite remarkable. It's quite remarkable. And so therefore, if I am to, okay, that's critical thinking. We're doing critical thinking. We're studying the, and if we are to do a study, we can start an hypothesis because that's what thinking is. You know, that's how you do. That's how you do. You get an epiphany, an epiphany. Yes, that's what you do. Okay, that's what you got. and you develop a theory, and from that theory, then you move it to its logical end. Okay, we talk about Haiti, and we talk about Cuba. We talk about Jamaica and those other three countries. Haiti and Cuba, very poor country compared to these other countries. Not as okay, they're very involved in the Caribbean. The Haiti and Cuba not as involved. Why is that the case? All right, let's look at their independence. How did they get in their independence? Cuba, Jamaica, and so on. Their independence the independence that they got was ceremonially gifted to them. The independence that these countries got was ceremonial. As against Cuba and Haiti, their independence was ceremonially gifted to them. They fought for their independence. They fought against the US. They fought against France. They fought against the post-industrial country or the status quo, the global leaders. They took their independence. So countries that fight against or get their independence on their own terms are today experiencing lack, backwardness, and extreme poverty. Let that settle for a little bit, for a minute. Jamaica could be like Haiti today, and Cuba. But maybe because we like lap dogs, we accepted the terms of our independence. And today we continue to pay homage to the Queen. Sorry, the King, or the mother country. So that's important. Goals and learning outcomes. Understand and appreciate how the history of the Caribbean shaped their own personal history. Understand specific ideologies that arose from the social and political realities of the Caribbean. Understand again specific ideologies. So, for example, again, Rastafarianism, that arose from the social and political realities. Okay. Attitudes towards certain positions. That comes from inherited ideologies. Understand the personal background of influencers of thought and its impact on their thinking. And influencers of thought and its impact on thinking. Analyze and evaluate the actions and ideologies of select thinkers. Appreciate their personal responsibility to advocate for the vulnerable in Caribbean societies. Appreciate the role of public theology in shaping thought and addressing issues of oppression and exploitation in the Caribbean. Public theology, and again, shaping thought and addressing issues. But has our public theology shaped? What thought has public theology shaped that addresses issues of oppression and exploitation in the Caribbean? The Baptist Church, and Paul Bogle was a Baptist, okay? So yeah, they were part of the resistance movement. The church was largely part of the resistance movement and helped to facilitate the resistance movement. And we have to be able to connect our personal story to the story of the region. We'll be able to utilize film to dissect and unveil the Caribbean story in relation to the global dynamics of the world. Say, for example, the film Life and Death. We will definitely watch that film, not this week, at some point in this course. We will watch that film. As we begin to move into the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, we will begin to talk about that film. We will watch that film. And of course, we'll submit a final essay paper that is well researched and part of current thinking among young academics. We'll be able to use digital technology to transmit their critical thinking. Those are that's the outcome of what's this? That's the goal and learning outcomes. And of course, the student learning outcome is that the students on completion of the course will be able to develop their critical thinking and tell their own story of the Caribbean people, examine the issues of identity and color in relation to Caribbean history and colonization, explore poverty and inequality in the Caribbean as a direct result of neoliberal globalization, develop your thinking and writing towards developing a Caribbean perspective. Trace the story of your own families as far back as possible. Relate your personal history with that of Caribbean history, critically examining its impact on their family background. Critically analyze, rethink the perspectives of key Caribbean and diaspora thinkers, and analyze their credibility for today and the future. Examine the role of religion in the defense of repudiation of slavery. Discuss ways in which society and you, the students, can advocate and act on behalf of the vulnerable and the oppressed. For example, we're going to consider the Haitian crisis and see how can we support Haiti and what they are going through. Discuss the church and your role in challenging structural injustice. Articulate your perspective on the Bible's relevance to the Caribbean context. Explore U.S.-Caribbean relations in shaping Caribbean and its diaspora. Consider the question, is there any hope for the Caribbean and Jamaica in light of Western capitalist penetration in the global South? And you will begin to explore mediums to express your thoughts: social media platform, podcasting, YouTube, writing letters to publishers and bloggers. And I'm going to ask that you guys start thinking about submit letters to the Gleaner, submit letters to the Observer, or to various mediums. Start podcasting or YouTubing or social media. Share your thoughts, contribute to thought. Start doing so. Very important. Of course, we're going to the instructional procedures of the course: lectures, digital and multimedia presentations. We're not going to do much group work in this course because it's a small class. Weekly, we'll do group work as a group together. Weekly journals and interaction papers. I'm going to talk about that some more. Essays and quizzes. There's just one final essay. There's just one final essay and a midterm paper. That's it. And of course, the exam. That's the only. Okay. Final essay, which is 40% of the grade. Final exam, which is 40% of the grade. 3 interaction paper, one of which is something that tells you your own story, that traces your own roots and identity. Who are you as a person? Where do you come from? It means you're gonna have to do your research, talk, and your source is going to be your own family, your birth records, your family, your church, your community. Have conversation with them. Where you're from, the complexity of your family, your roots, where you guys hail from. Are you from an African heritage, Indian, European, or are you tied to an indigenous? Is there a line of is there a break in the line of your family? How far back can you go in determining your own family history? Okay, we will do that as an assignment that you guys will have to do. That's one of the 3 interact or reflections you have to do. So it's only 3 assignments. You'll do a midterm and a final research paper, and of course the exam. And of course the 3 interaction papers, 2 interacting with lectures and materials. 1 is something that traces your heritage and your roots. That's what you'll be required to do in terms of graded work. We will have cinematic film presentations, but we will provide 2 or 3 films for you guys to watch in this course. Assignments and graded work attendance. I have 15% here. We're going to change this. There are 13 classes that will cover the course. Materials, students' participation and attendance will attract a grade that counts towards the overall grade, and will get the maximum grade if they fully participate in the course by being on time, attending all classes and meeting all deadlines and timelines. Students should communicate with their lecturer ahead of time if they are having any difficulty meeting deadlines. Weekly interaction paper, I said this. Now, ignore this section, please. It says weekly interaction paper 5%. No, there's only 3 interaction paper. You have the luxury. You can choose any week you want to present, but I need 3 interaction papers, 1 to 2 pages, interacting with the material or the class that you have done. We're going to next week I will discuss at the beginning of the class how I would like you guys to submit your interaction paper. What's an interaction paper? What goes into the interaction paper? How I would like you to submit your interaction paper. So no interaction paper is due at this time. But I will tell you what is required and what I'm expecting from the interaction paper that you guys will submit. But in terms of the film, we're gonna watch Who Shot the Sheriff, Born for Dead, Story of the Maroons, History of Reggae, Dirty Pretty Things. There's one on corruption. We will not watch 12 Years of Slavery, but we will watch Life and Death. Those are the films for the class. Again, Life and Death, Corruption, Dirty Pretty Things, The History of Reggae, Story of the Maroons, Born for Dead, and Who Shot the Sheriff. That's the film we're going to be watching for the class.
Sorry, sir. In terms of the films, you are going to provide them here, right? We won't have to source them on our own.
Yeah, I will present them, but if you guys want to source it and watch it ahead, that's fine. You are free to do so, but we will watch them in the class.
Okay.
We will watch them in the class and discuss it. And in terms of 10% of the grade, here we go. 10% of the grade will be based on attendance and participation. The students will be required to submit at least. By the way, I have Grammarly on my, so you know Grammarly corrects everything. So please excuse the highlights. You might be seeing highlights right now. Are you guys seeing the highlights?
Not at all.
Oh, okay, great. The students will be required to submit at least 3 1- to 2-page interaction papers interacting with the read for class lectures and materials. The professor will expound on this later, and I'm expounding on it now. Okay, so the first one you do is just one where you trace your heritage. You will not do so this week. I guess you will do. Week after next, you can present that one. Midterm paper, 10% of the grade. 10% of the grade will be determined by an 8 to 10-page proposal paper in which the student interacts with and submit a proposal essay paper of the final paper. Now the final paper, I will talk about the final paper. So midterm is, let me see, when is midterm? Midterm is sometime in March. So sometime in March, like say by March 15. By March 15, and I'll add it. March 15, you guys are supposed to submit a midterm paper, which is a proposal of your final paper. And the proposal should include a methodology, expounding your final paper, which is everybody's going to do the same question. Everyone is going to do the same question. So I will talk about that in a little bit. And I have an example of a proposal that is available, that is attached. It's attached to the updated syllabus. So the syllabus that I sent you previously before today never had this. So I sent you new syllabuses in an email, and also it's attached a new one and deleted the old one from the JTS online platform. And it shows it's updated. That's okay. So you guys have to just make note of that. But I'll talk about the proposal a little bit in a second. But let's talk about the final research paper, because the midterm has to do with the final. 40% of the final research paper, 40% of your grade will be determined by a 20 to 25-page essay paper, which is really a findings paper, which the students will be required to complete and submit by the final day of the term. The research paper will be an exploration. Now listen to this, very important. The research paper will be an exploration of the changing attitudes towards Afro-Caribbean beliefs. Again, the research paper will be an exploration of the changing attitudes towards Afro-Caribbean beliefs, where the student will conduct a survey among his community, church, and/or school and work, your sphere, amongst your peoples, your community, where you interact and you live and work and go to school and so on, among your peers. of how attitudes are changing and provide your findings.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, sir. Does that say 20 to 25 pages?
Yes.
Very good question.
Yes. Is that too much?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
But you guys only have 3. You guys only are doing an exam, a final research paper, and a midterm
Sir,
paper.
I
That's it.
struggle to,
Oh, and
struggle to
3.
write a 8 to 10 page paper.
The 8 to 10 pages midterm.
Yes, I struggle. And I talk a lot, so I don't know how the 25 will go.
But turn your talking into words. Trust me. Write what you are saying, and you will find the word. But okay, no. Actually, please remember now, it's guided. The final paper is guided. It's a guided paper. It's a guided paper, actually. It's a guided paper. What you're doing is you're doing research. We're going to talk about that in a minute. I'm going to come back to the research because probably today's class I may not have time to go. I might have only 30 minutes to go through the lecture, but that's fine because I want to go through the research paper and make a presentation as it relates to the research paper. So I might change my lecture for today and go into something else. But let's continue with the syllabus. You guys were late. By the way, when it comes down to if we start class 30 minutes late, be prepared to stay for an additional 30 minutes. Last week, some of you just left when we started class 45 minutes into the time. So, and some of you just disappeared. When I looked, there was only much about 3 people on the thing, and we don't have a big class. So it's easy for me to tell when people leave. So I'm going to have a stipulation. If we start late, my goal is not to go beyond 6, but if we start late, it will mean I need more time to finish the material. Okay, so I'm going to ask that you give me some time to wrap up the class and to finish the material. Let me know, okay? Yes, a hand.
Yeah, sir, I apologize. I know we started late today, but there is a student council event that starts today at 5:45, so I wouldn't be able to stay past 5:45 today.
What student council event is this?
It's a seminar on mental health, on how to avoid burnout, and yes.
This is how to avoid burnout. Like you have a class from 3 to 6, and there's another something else that clash. Then what you do is then that seminar, you let them know that I'm going to be there at 6 o'clock because I have to. But okay, fine. I want you to be at this class until 6 o'clock. This
Okay,
class
sir.
is from 3 to 6, and it's I think my class is very important because I spend a lot of time preparing the material for you guys. Let me tell you, I prepare. When I prepare, I prepare. I prepare for classes. My staff will tell you that. So I want you guys to take the classes seriously. It's very important.
All right. No, noted, sir. Just wanted to make that. Just wanted to let you know if you see
All
me
right.
drop off early today.
If it's one thing your professor takes seriously, it's coming to class and being on time. That's very important to me. I'm a stickler for that. Okay, and I watch that. And if you miss 30 minutes of class, that goes towards your total amount of your total amount of hours you are allowed to miss. It adds up. So say for example, you are only allowed to miss 6 hours, and over the 5 classes you're 30 minutes late. That means you're going to start losing points because you're 30 times 5 is how much. Okay, that it add up, and I watch that. It's very important. Okay, because we're preparing professionals. All right. So let's continue. Now, in terms of extra credit, you will, however, get extra credit if you write a 500-word essay, 500-word summary. And by the way, my classes are easy. Everybody passed my classes. Everybody will tell you that, except maybe 1 or 2 students might fail the course in the past, but they failed not because of anything that I have done. It could be because guess what? They only come to 4 classes, okay? Or they decide to they don't do any coursework and only the exam. You have to pass the coursework and the exam, okay? Or they sit the exam and answer the first 5 questions and miss the last question, which is worth 35% of the exam. You know what I mean? That's the only reason. But everybody will pass this course. It's easy. But it's not, I'm not going to say it's easy. Critical thinking is never easy, because the important thing is not about getting an A or B or a C. The important thing is developing oneself in order to be a value-added person in society. Okay? The final exam is worth 40% of the grade. And let me just put this into perspective now as it relates to the research paper. You will submit a research proposal mid-semester on research that each of you will do, exploring the changing attitudes towards Afro-Caribbean beliefs. For class research, changing attitudes towards Afro-Caribbean beliefs, what are we asking? What are the changing attitudes towards Afro-Caribbean beliefs? What were they like then, and what is it now? If there is a change, why or why not? How have attitudes affect and influence policy and behaviors? And then I say, see research proposal and initial study question here. So which I will explore. I don't know if I have time to explore this now. Maybe. I don't think I have. Okay, fine. Let's go to the hyperlink. Open hyperlink. Now, if you click on that, it should take you to the it should take you straight to the hyperlink. Are you seeing the hyperlink?
Yes, sir.
What you guys see on the screen?
It says exploring changing attitudes towards Afro-Caribbean beliefs in Jamaica, a study of socio-political, religious, and cultural.
Oh no, okay. You're not seeing the NeoLiberal.com? The NeoLiberal Corporation?
No.
All right, okay.
Well, it does. It says that there's a hyphen after influences, and then it says the NeoLiberal Corporation.
All right, let's click on this. There is actually a Chantel can help us with that. Can send each of you the link to the study, because I would love each of you to actually do the study yourself, to go in and fill out the questionnaire if you, or fill in. But let's share this screen here with you guys. Are you guys seeing the screen now? You see Bob Marley?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right, this is the NeoLiberal.com. So the study is available on the NeoLiberal.com website. If you go to the course outline and then click on open in hyperlink, it will take you straight to this website, and the website has the study. So this is the proposal. So let's say if you're giving me an 8 to 10, by the way, we'll cut it down. You could give it to me in 15 to 20 pages. All right, we'll cut it down to 15 to 20 pages, and then the proposal, I'll cut it, instead of 8 to 10, just give me 5 to 8. How does that sound?
That's a lot better. Thank you.
All right, cool. All right, cool. So we'll do 5 to 8 pages for the midterm proposal, and then for the final, we'll do 15 to 20, okay, instead, or yeah, 15 to 20. All right, but this is the proposal. The research plan. So you're submitting the proposal should resemble something like this: research proposal exploring changing attitudes towards Afro-Caribbean beliefs. And it's a research. The research plan is on valuing African identity through religious affirmations of African traditions. Again, the research plan, we're looking at how do we value, or we're putting it in a positive way. We want to place value on African identity. Again, we want to place a value on African identity, because we're saying that still we live in a global world where there is still not much value that is being placed on African or or Afro-Caribbean beliefs. And so we said the research plan, so we want to place value, or we want to value African identity by exploring religious affirmation of African traditions. So in the research study, we aim to explore changing attitudes towards Afro-Caribbean beliefs in Jamaica and the Caribbean. In the study, what are we doing, or what's the aim? Our aim. So the thing is, when you write this study, I have information available already, which you can copy from, okay? However, except that your context is different. Your population is different, because your population could be people drawn in Portmore, particularly at these places, okay? At the Kingston Church of God or whatever. While for me, it's more, the study I am embarking on is more a wider study, okay? But the population is different. So it's easy. What I'm saying to you guys, I'm not making it as hard, because we're doing it as part of a group together, but we are going to divide up the work so that each of you present your findings based on your own sphere, your own influence, your own population, your own context, looking at the changing attitudes toward Afro-Caribbean beliefs in your own area. So that's the only difference. So the proposal is the same thing. So of course, what you're giving me this. But in this research study, what are we aiming? What is the aim? We're aiming to explore changing attitudes towards Afro-Caribbean beliefs in Jamaica and the Caribbean. Okay? But particularly, so when you write your proposal, it's in Jamaica and the Caribbean, but particularly in your own area, and you state what that area is. Okay? So you would write, in this research study, my aim is to explore changing attitudes towards Afro-Caribbean beliefs in Jamaica and the Caribbean, but particularly, and you state the area, Kingston, or whatever Kingston area, or whatever area that you are in, whatever area you live in, and so on and so forth, because it's based on your own population, your own context. You're studying your own context, okay? And of course, we said it's a study of political, religious, and cultural influences. And the study, when you do the study will have an introduction. You present your introduction. Of course, you have your cover page, research proposal, exploring changing attitude toward Afro-Caribbean beliefs. Researcher with yourself, coordinator. You don't have a coordinator, and whatever. Then you have your introduction. In Jamaica, there has historically been a negative perception towards African and indigenous spiritual practices. Again, in Jamaica, there has historically been a negative perception towards African and indigenous spiritual practices, religious beliefs, customs, and faiths that draw influences from urban Indian heritage or African traditions. And of course, I know this to be true, and many of you know that to be true. And of course, that's something that you could include as a question in the study. What has been the attitude on a scale of 1 to 10? What has been your attitude toward Afro-Caribbean belief 10 years ago? Okay, and what it is now on a scale of 1 to 10, whatever the case is. But anyway, as I said to you, in my experience, we've always looked down on Rastafarianism in the context I grew up, the family traditions that I had. We did not embrace Obia, Voodoo, Pocomania, revivalists. We saw Muslim as not the right. Of course, within Christianity, there is always this privilege. I am the way that, okay, no man cometh to the Father except through Christ. So even within Christendom, okay, let's hold on. even within Christendom, even within Christianity, there is this privilege. We talk about privilege. As a post-colonialist, we are against privilege. The Caribbean position and the Caribbean as part of an invention, what it is invented or what it is today is a result of certain traditions, a tradition of privilege, which continues in various forms today. And I say to you, Mutabaruka said that God is an invention. We'll talk about that. What is he talking about? But, you know, man is not free from the corruption of self, the corruption of this selfishness, this privilege. We have this privilege. It is this privilege that has helped to create the dependency and lack in the Caribbean position or the black position. This same privilege is found in religious movements and groups, even as they try to outmaneuver and outduel each other. Yes, this privilege. It is this very same privilege that that Jesus on the cross demonstrated in order for us, for men to draw all men unto himself or whatever. He gave up his deity, the privilege of his divinity. He gave up his, and I was talking to my uncle some time ago, you know, this division within the church is what is preventing the kind of unity needed in order to realize progress in the world today, because even within religious institutions, in societies, there is this dividedness, because they all have this level of privilege, where they privilege their position, privilege their thought. So, and I say to you, Kant says that human nature, history is a result of the varieties of human natures and circumstances, where human beings have always been brushed with this tendency of privileging themselves, okay, and their ideas. And they have created institutions out of these ideas, which has formulated societies that we now live, that has created dynamics of positions, okay, positions where some men are free and others aren't. Some men are better than others. Yes, that those ideas, okay, and institutions that Michel Foucault talks about, like the church and Kant and so on, and the kind of intellectualism that Brahms talked about, help to support this thing. So we talk about the importance of studying institutions and beliefs and traditions. Rastafarianism, and that's why we have Rastafarianism as a direct result of this privilege. So people, okay, but we'll talk more about that. I won't delve into it yet. Rastafari, because I'm talking about the study that you guys have to present. Rastafarianism, Obia, Voodoo, Pocomania, Poco Church, revivalist Muslim beliefs, they have often been marginalized, deemed as fringe, demonic, unpopular, juxtaposed against the inherited traditions from European colonialism. The Judeo-Christian faith, such as Roman Catholicism, Protestantism, and evangelicalism, has been favored and considered closer to the truth and the ideal. Of course, we live in the New World, which is part of the Western civilization. I said to you, how far do you go back when you study the Caribbean? You don't, okay, you go back as, you don't start from the 1960s, because we are part of a wider civilization, a wider society. However, in the 21st century, with increased exposure, awareness, critical thinking, and a more liberal lifestyle, particularly among the younger generation, it is crucial to investigate whether attitudes towards Afro-Caribbean beliefs are changing. So the study aims to explore the shifting attitudes of Jamaicans and the factors contributing to these changes, considering demographic variables such as location, age, educational levels, income status, political affiliation, denominationality, and religious beliefs. What are our research objectives? Okay, of course, your research objective will be the same objective as mine. Okay, so that's what I'm telling you. You don't have the work is not difficult. Okay, the only difference is that you are studying a different population. You are studying the population, but you are now you're doing it in a different context. Okay, that's the only that is what is going to so the job is easy. I make it easy for you guys. Okay, so when in the proposal that you present to me in March, will have research objectives. Number 2, research objectives. I have one, but that's an error. Go to the research objectives. The main objectives of this study are as follows. 1, you want to always have an objective to examine if Jamaican attitudes towards Afro-Caribbean beliefs have evolved over time. To determine if specific demographic factors influence changing attitudes, including location, age group, educational levels, income status, political affiliation, denominationality, and religious beliefs. To investigate the potential role of socio-political factors, religious influences, education, pop culture, travel experiences, and exposure in shaping attitudes toward Afro-Caribbean beliefs. To explore perceptions of African religious practices as cultic or occult and their impact on attitudes. So after you have stated your research objectives, then you want to provide the methodology. What's the methodology? Participant selection. So your methodology will include participant selection, a diverse sample of Jamaican individuals representing different demographics, including location. Participant selection will be a diverse sample of Jamaican individuals representing not necessarily different demographics, okay? Different demographics, but, well, representing similar demographics within a particular locale, but different demographics in terms of age. Because as I said to you, I am looking at the whole, you guys are looking at the particular. So you guys, your demographics are smaller. So your demographics would be a little bit similar, okay, because you're looking at a more smaller group. You're looking at your church, you're looking at your community. So the participant selection, so it won't be a diverse sample of Jamaican. It's a diverse sample of Jamaican Jamaican individuals, okay, of similar demographics, similar community, okay, but within a wide age, but formulating a wide age range. So that's what you will have. So it would not say a diverse sample of Jamaican individuals represented different demographics. Okay, yes, different demographics, okay, but within the same locale. All right, the same locale, but different age group. That's very important. The educational levels might be different. The income status is going to be different. The political affiliation is probably going to be different. Denominationality might be similar, but and that includes Protestant, Anglican, Roman Catholic, Seventh-day Adventist, Evangelical, Revivalist, Poco, Mormon, Universal. Religious beliefs could be Rastafarianism, Judaism, Satanism, Islam, Nation of Islam, Christianity, atheism, deism, and other will be. So you might be, say for example, you might be in Portmore or Britain, and you might have all these various groups in Britain. The questionnaire development, a research questionnaire will be designed. So you guys will design a questionnaire, and so a research questionnaire will be designed to collect both qualitative and quantitative data. The questionnaire will cover the following sections. Section 1, demographics. You will gather information on on gender, age, location, educational level, income status, etc. Section 2, religious affiliation, identify participants' religious beliefs and denominationality. 3, attitudes towards Afro-Caribbean beliefs. Measure the participants' level of agreement with statements reflecting attitudes towards Afro-Caribbean beliefs. 4, additional information, provide participants on opportunity to share their personal experiences, perceptions, and factors influencing their attitude towards Afro-Caribbean beliefs. I need to add something to this. Provide opportunities for the participants to state their attitudes and perceptions towards Afro-Caribbean beliefs between periods. Say, for example, 10 years ago as against now. Optional information, explore participants' political affiliation and any additional thoughts they may have. Data collection, the questionnaire will be distributed through online platforms, social media, your local community centers to ensure wide representation of Jamaican society. The responses will be collected anonymously to maintain confidentiality. Not necessarily, because you will distribute the papers to your friends and family, but of course, they would not need to write their name. So yes, there's anonymity that's associated with this study. Data analysis, quantitative data will be analyzed using statistical methods, including descriptive analysis and inferential statistics. Qualitative data will undergo thematic analysis to identify recurring patterns, themes, and insights. You guys will be required to do some readings around this, do some research to find out if anyone has done any writing or reading that surveys Afro-Caribbean attitudes towards Jamaicans over the if any study has been done. I doubt it. What are the ethical considerations? The study will adhere to ethical guidelines, ensuring participant anonymity, informed consent, and voluntary participation. The collected data will be securely stored and used solely for research purposes. By examining, of course, the collected data will be used to support your own findings and your own work. By examining changing attitudes towards Afro-Caribbean beliefs in Jamaica, the study aims to shed light on the impact of socio-political factors, religion, education, pop culture, travel experiences, and exposure on the evolving perceptions of Jamaicans. The findings will contribute to a deeper understanding of how societal changes influence cultural attitudes, promoting inclusivity, tolerance, and cultural heritage preservation. Ultimately, the research aims to encourage a more informed and respectful dialogue surrounding Afro-Caribbean beliefs in Jamaican society. So that is really that's the study, and that will be the study that you will present, and of course you will have the questionnaire. And there is a sample questionnaire. If you go to this site and click on that, it takes you straight to this page, okay, where you can actually do the questionnaire. And I would love each of you to complete the questionnaire. This is the questionnaire is actually available, but you guys will do this for yourself. You would not need to give this questionnaire for your own study. Because you will create your own study, and you can create your own questionnaire based on this, but with one or two slight changes, because there's something that we need to add to the questionnaire. What has your beliefs changed over the last 15 years? Yes or no? If it has, how has it changed? By answering these questions: positive, not so positive, negative, not so negative, neutral. Something of the sort. What if it did change? What it is today? Again, positive, negative, not so negative. Those I will need to add those two. So you're going to create a questionnaire. So when you submit your proposal, the proposal will have a questionnaire that you're going to give out to your respondents. You will create the questionnaire, attach it to your proposal at the back of and send it in, and it will have the same questions that I have here that I'm asking you guys to complete, and you can complete what you guys could do, you could actually complete this survey yourselves. And as you complete the questionnaire, you also want to write the question and the questions down so that you probably could use it to inform your own questionnaire so that it looks exactly like this, with the addition of those two questions that I'm asking you to add. What your position before now, positive, not too positive, negative, not too negative, or neutral, okay, and what it is if it was negative, and what it is now, positive, not too positive, negative, not too negative, neutral. Okay, I want you to add those. That's the only thing that's not on here that you guys will add on yours. And of course, as I said to you, you guys, the research you're doing is more specific to a particular location, your own sphere of influence, among your own sphere, your community, where you work or where you worship. You're doing it amongst those groups. So location will be much smaller. But it's each of you. So when each of you complete that study and submit your work, and we combine them, we're looking at the whole gamut. We're looking at a fuller picture as well. So you guys can this is available on your outline. If you follow the outline, you can get to this page actually. Okay, so that is that. Let's go back. Actually, did you guys see the? Oh no, you guys didn't see the link questionnaire that came up. So let's link. I don't think you did. Did you guys see the questionnaire that came up just now?
No, sir.
I don't know why it's not coming up. Exploring, is this it? Okay, hold on. There we go. Oops. Where am I? Oh, okay. I know where I'm at now. I'm sorry. I am trying to bring up a window. Here we go. Okay, new share. You guys should be seeing it now. Share screen. Are you guys seeing that? Are you seeing the
Yes.
question? Right.
Yes.
Once you click on the hyperlink in the course outline, it will take you to the neoliberal.com that has directly to the article that speaks to the questionnaire. I mean, that speaks to the research, the proposal. And then it's actually, there's a picture of the proposal. Once you click on the image, it takes you to the actual questionnaire that you can complete. You can complete it and then go to next. And then next is 6 pages. And you guys can write down the questions. And of course, you guys just need to add 2 more things to your own questionnaire, which is what I just said. Okay. There's a part that says location, rural, urban, city. You will still ask that question. You still add that question. And then where it says specify location, then they can specify the Portmore, whatever, Brayton, Kingston, whatever the case is. So, but so everything actually is perfect. You guys don't need to change anything. You guys can leave everything as is. Just add that question to your proposal, to your questionnaire, and then you guys can do as in terms of how many people you should interview, as many as you would like, but no less than at least 20, no less than 25. Yeah, to get a good amount of people to do research. 25 is good. 25 to 30 would be good. They're no less than 25. So at least interview 25 people, give out 25 research questionnaires, and then you can study them, study the responses based on what you've got back. So that is the research and the midterm paper that you have to do. Let's go back to the I'm going to go back to Where is it? Course outline, new share, back to course outline, and share. All right, so that is for the research. As it relates to discussions and lecture topics for the course, Caribbean thought, ideology, and philosophy, the challenge of identity, and the issue of sexuality. I don't know if I'm going to have a guest lecturer, Reverend Hewitt Holmes. I'm not sure. We've had him before, but I have a copy of his lecture. I can actually have you. I have his lecture on a recording, so I can actually provide the lecture for you if he can't come to the lecture. But he talks about the issue of sexuality, poverty and income inequality and opportunity, resistance and dilemmas of social power, the social origins of democratic socialism in Jamaica and the Caribbean. We talk about that. Neoliberal globalization and the black position. You hear me talk about the black position in the world. The global south and the global north dynamic. Global south, global north dynamic. I talk about if you want to understand the Caribbean, right? What is the Caribbean or study the Caribbean? Just look at immigration. When you look at immigration, you have an understanding of the Caribbean. It will help you to understand Caribbean people today and their realities. When you look at how travel happens, when people from the global south travel to the global north, okay, how they are treated, the kind of policy, okay, that countries have towards people who travel from the Caribbean or certain countries where you have more black people. The blacker you are, the blacker the country, the more black and brown people that's within a particular place or country. Okay, policy towards travel, immigration policy is much more draconian. Okay, of course, maybe because black and brown countries are more poorer. The countries that have more black people and brown are poorer than countries that don't, or not. Okay, probably that's the case. I don't know. But when you look at immigration policy and how travel happens, and how how they refer to, how they call it, how certain peoples are described. Okay, how they describe people coming from the global south into the global north, the use of aliens and illegal aliens. You don't hear that word being meted out to certain people coming from certain Anglo-Saxon countries. So of course, immigration is an important concept when you're studying Caribbean and Caribbean. But in fact, the Caribbean is a result of immigration. Okay. The challenge of identity and the issue of sex, poverty and inequality, resistance and dilemma of social power. We're at American penetration, Haiti, and justice. American penetration, Haiti, and justice. And I said to you, the trope of penetration is important. Let me hurry up, we're getting late. Science and technology. I wrote a paper many years ago in 2010 that science and technology is the key. From 2010, and I said that Jamaica needs to spend a lot. Caribbean people, we need to invest in technology. And I don't think there was a serious investment in, we need to read this. I mean, at the time I was saying we need to invest in science and technology. But I don't think the kind of investment that the Caribbean need in science and technology is the kind of investment that we're getting. And I don't think that there has been any will and any sacrifice in order to facilitate the kind of investment in science and technology. Maybe now, but historically they have not been. So therefore we are always behind. We are always playing catch up. The Caribbean have to do forward thinking. And of course, the Prime Minister talked about the realities of the Caribbean. And of course, I said that I was going to talk about that because on Twitter, on social media, he gave a presentation talking about the fact that the younger generation cannot be divorced from the fact that where we get money from. We get money from you. He was making a point that we get money from you. From you, the Jamaican, from you, the Caribbean. Okay, we get money from the taxes that come in from your work. But of course, there's a deeper story to that, because it means then you have to invest in the poorest of the Jamaican people. It means you have to spend on Jamaican so that Jamaican can work towards pumping money in the economy so that the government can spend to continue to develop the economy. Okay, but so we have to go. So Jamaica and Caribbean countries, we are starting from behind, but there has to be some investment in the people, in the Jamaican people, in the Caribbean people, in order to make them competitive, so that they can provide the kind of revenue. Because when the economy is active, when the people are active, so the government have to invest in the people in order so that the people can generate the revenues. Okay, but of course, there's always whether or not the government spends wisely on the funds that they have received. Spending wisely is important. But anyway, those are some of the points we're going to take up. Slavery, maroonage, emancipation, and humanization. Nationalism, including the Haitian War of Independence and the Cuban War of Independence. Pan-Africanism, religion, social consequences and empowerment. Colonialism, decolonization, and we talk about colonization have to do with control. To colonize something is to control it. To decolonize, so when you're and Franz Fanon talk about colonization being the depersonalization of humanity. So in order the depersonalization. So what's decolonization? Decolonization is the because colonization involves stripping away the human. Colonization is to reimagining and restoring the human. Okay. We're going to talk about post-colonialism and the bureaucratic phenomena. What's that? We're going to look at strategy and systems, slavery, feudalism, neoliberalism, Marxism, and capitalism. Capitalism versus dependent capitalism. Socialism versus democratic socialism, and neoliberalism versus liberalism. Immigration and brain drain and American politics. The last time we had Mr. John Anthony Castro, who is running for president, who came and talked to the class. I don't know if he'll be able to have time. He's in a lawsuit right now. He was recently indicted by the federal government on tax charges. We're not sure if we're going to be able to have him on the show. He did run in New Hampshire. I think he came second to last. But I said that that's the American way, the opportunity to be able to run in an election for the highest seat, irrespective of your color and your creed. But I said, yet those with money and inherited power continue to hold sway over the populace. Okay, so that's the point we want to explore. Deconstructivism and critical history and philosophy. When we do Caribbean thought, it's part of deconstructivism and critical history. I have introduction to podcasting. You can, I don't know if you're going to be able to do that, but I sometimes provide. We will discuss that briefly at the end of the class if we have time. Regenerative agriculture, science, innovation, social media, and digital technology as opportunities and threats moving towards competitiveness. We'll talk about that. I'm going to skip this. You guys can look at the rest of the discussion and the rest of these here. I don't think I need to I don't think we need to go through some of these. In terms of the reading list, all the reading material is here. Reading list, recommended reading, of course, neoliberalism, globalization, income inequality, poverty and resistance. That's the reading text. What's this? What's this? Oh, the Caribbean Reader is right here. You can get the Caribbean Reader let me see if open up the Caribbean Reader, open up hyperlink. This is if you go over to if you can actually get some of these by clicking on hyperlink. The hyperlink will take you to a lot of books. So what I did, that hyperlink, if you click on that hyperlink, it takes you to a lot of resources and materials. Okay, it takes you to the New Caribbean Thought Reader by Brian Meeks. That Journeys in Caribbean Thought by the Padgett Henry Reader, Journeys in Caribbean Thought, Beyond Coloniality, Citizenship and Freedom in Caribbean Race. So if you click on that hyperlink, it will take you to this page with a lot of material, which is easy. In fact, let me share my screen so that you have that. If you click on that hyperlink, the hyperlink takes you to this, takes you to all these materials. And many of these materials, you can just click on it and it takes you. This is Google Books. It takes you straight. It gives you the entire book, the entire edition. Say, for example, let's click on the New Caribbean Thought Reader. The New Caribbean Thought Reader opens up the entire book. Caribbean Thought Reader by Brian Weeks, University of West Indies. That's one of our main texts that I would like you to read. And in fact, the book starts with an introduction entitled by Brian Meeks called On the Bump of a Revival. And it says, in the brilliant afternoon sun, this is the Caribbean Reader by it's edited by Brian Meeks and Folk Lindahl. Edited means it's a collection of works. So anytime you have a collection of works, you have an editor who is responsible for putting the works together, and each chapter has a different author. So Brian Weeks, it's a very good book. It says, and the book starts in 1983. It's Caribbean Reader, but my Caribbean Reader starts before 1983. But they start there from 1983, which is okay. But I'm going to start it before that. But he started in 1983. In the brilliant afternoon sun of October 19, 1983, on the highest parade ground of the old fort, of the old fort recently renamed after his father, Maurice Bishop, Prime Minister of Revolutionary Grenada, was shot to death alongside some of his closest comrades. At the other end of the Soviet-built AK, at the other end of the Soviet-built AK-47 atomic rifles were soldiers of the People's Revolutionary Army, of which Bishop, only days before, had been the respected commander-in-chief. In a bizarre sequence of events, the exact order of which remains an issue of bitter dispute 16 years later, Bishop's prestige had, in the eyes of many of his supporters, in the ruling New Jewel movement, plummeted from the unassailable position of Jefe Maximo. He had in the weeks before been placed under house arrest and was now being described as a potential counter-revolutionary. To the average man in the streets, this volte-face, without either reason or explanation, and without any prior warning, was completely unacceptable. Firm supporters of the revolution rallied to its leaders and leading symbol of the social and economic gains of the previous hectic 4 years. Firm opponents, many of whom had always been way of the cocky, free-willing clan of the Jewel Boys, saw the detention as proof of their worst fears, so on and so forth. What are we talking about here? You guys can read this. He begins. Brian Meeks starts with a picture of the Caribbean in 1983 with Maurice Bishop, who was hailed as a revolutionary, the father of independent Grenada, was assassinated But days before he was hailed as the hero, but later was assassinated by some of his own comrades. The same thing happened in Haiti. The same thing happened in Togo. The same thing could have happened in Jamaica. Okay, where those countries seeking independence, a kind of independence that was socialist or Marxist, or a kind of independence that was anti-Western, created a problem for the status quo, the dominant class, for post-industrial countries that wanted a world order within their own eyes. And so because people like Bishop, people like Michael Manley, people like Fidel Castro, people like Walter Rodney, yes? Because these people wanted an independence, an ideology that was anti-Western, anti-European, that was more Eastern, or whatever the case might be. It created a problem for the former colonial masters who are still colonial masters. And in the end, you find many nationalists met their demise, met their end. Whether they were assassinated, whether they were kidnapped, say for example, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, he was kidnapped in 1961, 1962. Who was it? Epifanio from Togo. I'm pronouncing his name incorrectly. I got it for you. Epifanio, whatever the first prime minister of independent Togo was assassinated. They assassinated Walter Rodney because these. So when you ask where do you begin to study the Caribbean, of course, yeah, we can start in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, where there was this nationalist fight. Some people were fighting for independence through wars, others through ceremonies. But of course, for me, I start the Caribbean reader starts there, but I start before that. I will start before that. Okay. But you can read this book. This book is quite interesting. It's a book for you guys to consider. That's one of the materials for class. So please get a hold of this book. Another book that you will need to consider for the class, of course, I said Neoliberalism, Globalization, Neoliberalism. I don't know if it's available. Anyway, but let's go through it. Homi Bhabha, Location of Culture. And this is Homi Bhabha's Location of Culture. This book is very important to our studies. She talks about the center and the periphery. Kenneth Clark, The Dilemmas of Social Power. Dilemmas of Social Power. Kenneth Clark, Dilemmas of Social Power. The Dark Ghetto. This book is old, but it's like my Bible. You see, this book is like my Bible. But we will consider this book. If you type it, it should come up. Some of the materials are free because it's such an old book. We will consider that book. James D. Cockcroft and Andre Gonder Frank and Dale L. Johnson, Dependence and Underdevelopment. The book is here somewhere. Some of that book you may not be able to get. It's a recommended reading. It's not required. Mike Davis, Planet of the Slums. Where is that book? I have it somewhere. Mike Davis, Planet of the Slums. But it's about Brazil. And it was about Brazil and the slum conditions that they have. And of course, Brazil is an interesting situation. But they have been and how globalization has affected them and the issue of abject poverty. Devon Dick, The Cross and the Machete. That's a powerful book. Written Devon Dick, The Cross and the Machete. Native Baptists, Identity, Ministry, and Legacy That's a book that you guys, that's in your reading. I have I have included a lot of material for you guys to read. Jane Anna Gordon, Journeys into Caribbean Thought. It's a book in the US, but it's a very good book. And I have links to the book right there. Frantz Fanon, Black Skins, White Mask. Frantz Fanon, The Wretched of the Earth, translated from French by Richard Philcox. A very good book. I think I have that book here, Wretched of the Earth. That is not a recommended reading. It is a required reading as well. This is required reading. This one is required. Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon. And my book, Neoliberalism, Globalization, Income Inequality, Poverty and Resistance, that's recommended. That's a required reading. Eli Kaduri wrote a book on nationalism. If you study Caribbean thought, we have to delve into, we have to study nationalism, or we have to cover that topic. The issue of nationalism is important. The study of the nation, the study of become part of the Caribbean, the coming to be. We were not Caribbean thinkers. We were part of that whole nationalist movement. Okay, we have come to spur on that nationalist movement. So we will look at Eli Kaduri's book, the fourth expanded edition, Nationalism, the Caribbean Community Beyond Survival. Kingston, it's a book Ian Randall publishes, another local book here, The Caribbean Community, Contending with Destiny, the Caribbean in the 21st Century. That's a good book to read. The Black Jacobins, that's a required text. Very good book. Every one of you should read that book. That's one piece of writing that all post-colonialists should read. The Black Jacobins. Okay, C.L.R. James is not from Haiti. He's from Trinidad. But he wrote his magnum opus was this book, The Black Jacobins, talking about how Haiti got independence and talking about Oliver Toussaint, who helped to secure the freedom. Jamaica Kincaid, A Small Place. That's a book. Jamaica Kincaid, the book A Small Place, is a book about Antigua, and the film Life and Death about Jamaica is based on the book A Small Place, but the realities are similar. So that's why we said that when we study Caribbean, and when you start to look at the diverse currents and how you can take one current and fit it into another and talk about that same place, and you think it's somewhere, you're talking about Antigua when you're talking about Jamaica, and the language and so on, especially the English-speaking Caribbean. In fact, if you ever go to Antigua and have a conversation with some, you would think that you're talking to another Jamaican, the way how they speak and the inflections and so on. The Modern Caribbean, a book called The Modern Caribbean, regional W.A. Lawson, Religion and Race, African and European Roots in Conflict, a Jamaican Testament. Caribbean Popular Culture by John Lent. Main Currents in Caribbean Thought, The Historical Evolution of Caribbean Society in its Ideological Aspects. I believe you guys should read these. If you guys might not read everything on the syllabus, but you will always have the syllabus with you. And at some point in your journeys, you should get it. And if you guys can read some of these books, read them, or these texts, please do. The New Caribbean Thought Reader by Brian Weeks. We just looked at that earlier. Keith and Novella Nelson, The Social Origins of Democratic Socialism in Jamaica. Good book for you guys if you want to look at the democratic socialism in Jamaica. That's a very good place to start. Slavery, Social Death, or Communal Victory. A Critical Appraisal of Slavery and Social Death by Orlando Patterson. It's a good book for you guys to read. How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney. Now, that is a recommended reading. I didn't put recommended reading, but it is recommended. I'm telling you, you want to read that book. You want to read How Europe Underdeveloped Africa that book was banned for a long time. It wasn't available. In fact, in some places, it's still difficult to get. You want to read that book, okay? You want to read how Europe underdeveloped Africa, all right? And when you study Caribbean thought, you read that book. Walter Rodney was a Caribbean thinker, but he's writing about how Europe underdeveloped Africa, because the underdevelopment of Africa is part of the experience and the reality and the coming to be of Caribbean. Yes? Garnet Roper wrote the book Caribbean Theology and Public Theology. You want to read that book? That's recommended. That's recommended. That's recommended. So Walter Rodney book is recommended, and Garnet Roper's book is recommended. Dread Jesus. Dread Jesus. Some people talk about Black Jesus. For some people, it's very important for them, for you to have a Black Jesus in the church, because they want to be able to identify the Jesus that. So the Jesus that we have is a Jesus that's created in the mold of a people that represents that people. That is the Jesus that we worship and that we continue to today. Okay, where we a Jesus and a religion that bears no resemblance to the experience of Caribbean people or to their identity. Okay, but of course, now there's a move to now there is a move to make Jesus like us, to make him like us. But people would say, no, 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 you can't touch Jesus. You can't touch him. This is how he's supposed to look. When you said, they say how when you say how he's supposed to look, what are you talking about? Okay, who made him? Okay, the story that we have of the reality of Christ, that reality came from who? Man, or did it come from outside of him? Yet, God, we understand that God communicates with man. We talk about the Bible being the word of God, the inspired word of God. And inspiration is a conflicting idea to the study of Caribbean thought, in a sense, and critical thinking. Because we are suspicious of this inspiration. Because as I said to you, men have used religion or appealed religion and have created religion in such a way that give themselves appeal, that give themselves certain privileges. And we have even created inspiration within our understanding to solidify and to justify our privileges of the thing being special over anything else. We'll talk about that later on. Okay, we're coming to we have 4 minutes left. But I'm going to go until 5:15. I stop at 5:15. Give me 15 minutes and we'll wrap up. Greek life and thought. Why do I have a book about Greek life and thought? Greek life? Are we studying Caribbean thought? Caribbean studies? No, what I said to you earlier. Notice the course is called what? Caribbean thought. And we talk about we are part of the Caribbean. When you study in Caribbean, the reality of the Caribbean as an invention, part of a wider experience, part of a life and part of a society that has been inherited from way back, from Greco-Roman days and beyond that. Okay? And you look at how Greek life and Greek ideology have found its way in the kind of religion that we practice today, that has been inherited, which has transplanted African religion. So of course you want to look at Greek life and thought. You want to look at Theologica. Now those aren't they aren't recommended and they aren't required, but but I put them as part of a wider, as something that you may want to consider to read. Greek life and Greek thought is very important, because part of what we have today, part of knowledge, part of the information we have today comes to us from Greek. Okay? Critical issues in Caribbean development, Occidentalism and Orientalism. What's that? Ooh, the West in the eyes of its enemies. What is Orientalism? Edward Said talks about Orientalism and Occidentalism. That's very important. Okay, Orientalism and Occidentalism is a kind of ethnocentrism. Same thing as Orientalism. When you study Caribbean thought, yes, we will also delve into ethnocentrism and privilege, because we are also looking at Afrocentric ideas as against Eurocentric ideas, and the dynamics of these, and the society and the world in which we live, and how one supersedes the other, and or how they compete or clash. But when we talk about the West in the eyes of its enemies, in other words, Middle Eastern people or Eastern people, their views about the West or the Western world, they see the West as irreligious and ungodly. While in Orientalism, which is the East in the eyes of its enemies, which is, Orientalism, yes, is the East in the eyes of its enemies, would be the West. So the West views the East as unintelligent. That is Orientalism. They're unintelligent. They're simple. So that's Western ethnocentric ideology, or the ethnocentric beliefs about the East as against the West, how the East view the West and how the West view the East. That's what we're talking about when you look at Orientalism and Occident. So you want to read these two books as you study Caribbean thought. It's not required to read it, but I would add it as a recommended reading. These Ian Baruma and Edward Said, these are post-colonialist thinking in a sense, or they talk about Occidentalism and ethnocentrism. Occidentalism and Orientalism. And remember what I have said about Orientalism and Occidentalism. Orientalism and Occidentalism are really ethnocentric ideas contained in various societies. Okay, Western society in the Occidentalism, the West, the East is suspicious of the West. Okay, the East is suspicious of the West. It views the West as irreligious in a sense, while in Orientalism, the East is suspicious of the West. The West is suspicious of the East. Okay, and it treats and regards the East as simpletons or unintelligent. That is the idea of Occidentalism and Orientalism. The dead yard, I think so. These are some of the materials. Louise Bennett, there is a Caribbean comedian. I have some videos of her. There's a hyperlink that you can click on and open up some of these videos of some of the video, so you can do some external readings. So the syllabus have a lot of hyperlinks where you can click on and open the hyperlink. It takes you straight to the page, and you can feast yourself. The Haitian Revolution, the cost of corruption. These are all hyperlinks. Caribbean thought essay paper topics. Now, this is not relevant to you right now because in the past, the students would have had to write essays. You don't have to write, but I'm leaving them attached to this paper for your own personal reflection. Okay, your own personal reflection, and so you can look over them according to Life and Death. Jamaica have had to creatively respond to the negative effects of globalization that have weakened its ability to remain economically viable and independent. Illustrate some ways Jamaicans have been creative and discuss whether these are effective to realize the dream of the decolonized man. We will answer this question. We will watch the film, and I will ask you the question, and we will discuss this question after we've watched the film. Now, according to a respondent in the film, the Caribbean leaders were weak-kneed and lacked vision, placing blame squarely on the politicians of the 1960s to the 1990s for allowing structural adjustment and neoliberal globalization that destroyed their milk industry. This is juxtaposed with Michael Manley, who justified his decision to borrow money from the IMF, saying his hands were tied. Who is responsible for the economic failures of the Caribbean? Use the film to provide a response to these reflections in your groups. Okay, we will ask those questions, but of course, it's not. We will just have a general discussion about these. Globalization is said to be the sine qua non, the sine qua non, the ideal. Sine qua non is the ideal of economic development and prosperity. Sorry, globalization is not the ideal of economic development and prosperity. That was my conclusion in my study, which I produced in the book, because it has dehumanized small post-colonial economies, which have largely struggled to maintain socio-economic independence and wealth, realization of the nation, and carve its own path towards economic prosperity. Fanon writes that that the colonized, underdeveloped man is today a political creature in the most global sense of the term. What does he mean by that? What does Fanon mean and he said that in Wretched of the Earth. What does he mean? The colonized, and that will be in the exam. The colonized, underdeveloped man is today a political creature in the most global sense of the term. Now, that was Fanon writing in 1960s. Does that pertain today? Is the post-colonial man still underdeveloped? Is he still a political creature? And I will say, yes, he is still a political creature because of the ongoing strategy through policy, various economic policy throughout history to make the Caribbean and the post-colonial man, the former colonized, uncompetitive and backward, using debt or through various international policies. Okay, we talk about the poorest places in the world today are people that the formerly colonized people. So today, and you look at what's going on in Haiti today. Okay, and all over the world, where, say for example, the U.S. imposes an economic embargo on some countries that it feels is anachronistic or runs incongruous to its political and economic ideals. You think, look what's going on in the Middle East. In Russia today. Russia is at war with Ukraine, a former colony, because it's trying to reassert itself and to dominate and make example of a smaller, formerly colonized country. So Fanon's writing continue to hold true for us today, not just in the Western world, but even in the East. What does Fanon mean by this, and what implications follow from this determination? The colonized, underdeveloped man is today a political creature. Explain the difference between the two predominant ideological positions and power blocks that affected the Caribbean nationalist thinking, and state how these positions affected Caribbean struggles and the Caribbean thought for drive for self-determination and sovereignty. The difference between two predominant ideological positions. What are we talking about here? Explain the difference between two predominant ideological positions and power blocks that affected the Caribbean nationalist thinking. What are we talking about? Capitalism and what? Communism. Okay? Bob Marley says, we don't look to capitalism in Who Shot the Sheriff. We don't look to capitalism and Marxism. We look to the I. Okay? The hope for him was in something that was religious. He doesn't look to anything economical. And of course, the Caribbean reader that we read earlier, we talk about AK-47 and the Soviets. We talk about the Soviets. Soviet represents the East. It represents communism, socialism, as against the US represents, and Germany and so on represents the West, capitalism. So when we talk about explain the difference between the two predominant ideological positions and power blocks that have affected the Caribbean's nationalist thinking and drive, and state how these positions affected Caribbean struggles and Caribbean striving for self-determination and sovereignty, we're talking about the two power blocks, capitalism and communism. That when we look at the 1970s and 80s in Jamaica, that was what created the instability in Jamaica, the conflicts between the communists and the capitalists, the Eastern support and the West. That has always also affected the Caribbean. The Caribbean, we said that, or we talk about violence. Violence is more effective than non-violence in resisting neoliberal globalization and creating real social change. We talk about violence. To what extent has the Caribbean as a region achieved power? Again, to what extent has the Caribbean as a region achieved actual power? What am I talking about? In the book Neoliberalism, Globalization, Income Inequality, Poverty and Resistance, and also in the book The Dark Ghetto, Kenneth Clark talks about the experience of freedom. It's freedom in the right direction. And if I could find it, he talks about the experience of freedom is freedom in the right direction. Let me see if I could find it here. And I'm wrapping up because I know I'm wrapping up. The role of the involved, blah, 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 blah. I can't find it. Come on. But he talks about, he defines freedom in those terms. Where are we? Violence is blah, blah, blah. Is there, Where are we? To what extent has, right, so freedom, he defines freedom as the realization, to measure freedom. He says, Kenneth Clark asked the question, he said that we have to ask the question, to what extent has the Caribbean as a region achieved actual power? It is the ability to wield actual power that determines the extent of the independence and the freedom that we have received. So when you start, okay, fine. So when we start to look at the Caribbean, we ask those self-questions. To what extent has the Caribbean as a region achieved actual power? Means to what extent our ability to be able to wield power and to vote with our dollar. We talk about in economics, we talk about the power of the dollar, the ability to vote with your dollar. That's the economic concept. The ability to vote with your dollar, or to, in other words, and we talk about the power of your dollar, the power of your currency, the strength of your currency. And remember, part of Caribbean, part of Jamaica's experience of globalization was to neoliberalize. And part of that was to reduce the efficacy and the strength of its currency, weaken the Jamaican dollar, because the Jamaican dollar is not supposed to be as strong as the US. So that's, and and the day when we devalue our currency was a bad move. From that, the slide went, and it started to slide. So that now we are heavily dependent on external foreign dollars and foreign activity. Is there a Caribbean identity? If so, what does that look like, given the discussions about individuals and group rights? Is there a Caribbean identity? If so, what does that look like, given the discussion about individual and group group rights? If not, why not? And what does that mean for the fight for self-determination and self-governance? And by the way, you're going to hear me talk about what has dogged the Caribbean, or what that the Caribbean people shot themselves in their foot when they decided to go it alone. Because there was a move in the 1950s leading up to the Treaty of Chaguaramas for all the Caribbean countries. Was it the Treaty of Chaguaramas? Oh, sorry, Federation for the Jamaica, for the Caribbean countries, some Caribbean countries to get to develop independence and to develop a federation. But there was this selfishness and privilege that crept in, where all the nationalists from the various countries wanted to control their own little domains. But little did they know what was happening. That the kind of independence that the Caribbean wanted was needed in order to survive what was coming, neoliberal globalization, and the competition that ensues, was a kind of Caribbean unity, a kind of independence where each Caribbean country, island, would have developed an independence, and they would morph into a form and a federation. But no, they all decided to scrap the independence, and Trinidad and Barbados up to today blame Jamaica, but that's not necessarily true. But they said that some of the Jamaicans and so on wanted to go it alone. But the fact of the matter is, we shot ourselves in the foot, got independence, and went on our own way. But then by the 1970s, when the oil crisis met, when we were met with the oil crisis, it required a kind of Caribbean unity that we never had. And fine, we decided to develop our own independence. But during the oil crisis, what did the Caribbean do as a region? They each went to the IMF individually. They could have come together, okay, to determine the kind of loans that they need and come up with a strategy. But no, they went their own separate way to negotiate loans with the IMF, the World Bank, with the international regime. The very same people who now they are going to be competing with. They went to get loans from the IMF, the World Bank, or whatever the case, or international regime, from the post-industrial country. The same people who granted them their independence, the same people who are competing, who they are competing with, and think that they were going to get a good deal. I never thought that they could have done it another way, developed some other strategy. You'll be asked to identify several thinkers from the Caribbean or its diaspora that have contributed to Caribbean thought, and complete a biography of one of the thinkers, tracing their history and struggle, and explain how their ideology was developed and what contributions they have left on the Caribbean or on you. Discuss how their influence has shaped Caribbean thought, and highlight whether this had any positive or negative impact on you or the Caribbean at large. Of course, you don't have to do that. This is just general questions for you to consider, that we will consider, or that you can consider. Is it true that the efficacy of the resistance movement against neoliberal globalization can only be determined by the extent to which it has realized actual power? What is meant by actual power? And discuss whether or not this is true, and if so, to what extent? If it is not true, why not? And what does that mean for the resistance movement? And what other efforts or agency can be applied with better outcomes? Neoliberal globalization is said to have propped up the wealth of the few over the many, and turned former colonies into indebted dependent states. How has neoliberal globalization done this? And what does that mean for their own futures? Neoliberal globalization. We talk about, next week we're going to begin by talking about penetration. Neoliberal globalization has opened up the economies of the global south so that more penetration can happen. But penetration was supposed to happen from the global north to the global south and from the global south to the global north. But that's not what happened. Most of the penetrating is being done from the global north to the global south, where they flood their economies with goods, with media, with technology. But very few penetration is happening from the global south to the global north. It suggests the power dynamic at play. The power dynamic at play between countries of the global north and countries of the global south, or former colonies that continue to be penetrated today through various international strategy, okay, or Pharisaicism, do as I say, but not as I do, where certain countries and certain bodies get to apply international rules when they feel as if they want to apply these rules. That's the bureaucratic phenomenon. That's the Pharisaicism. That continues today. But that's part of, we live in a competitive world. And what has dogged the Caribbean, it is this foolhardy position. It is this pie in the sky, as if all men are nice, as if everybody is good. They didn't realize that they are part of a global machinery that is and as such, when they engage in international negotiations, it has to be done with the understanding that they are in a highly competitive atmosphere, and so they have to advocate for their people in such a way that puts their people at an advantageous position, or put them in a position where they can protect any advantages that they can get. We're going to identify current and emerging trends in the 21st century and discuss whether and how the Caribbean is affected by or affects these trends. We talk about the vulnerability of the Caribbean based on its size and where it is. You want to consider the statement by Lewis Gordon that the Caribbean region, given its smallness and vulnerability, has been on the receiving end of the momentous events that characterize this age. If the Caribbean is at the receiving end of events, how can Caribbean people have any thought or become meaningful actors and creators in their own history and the history at large, or the history of the world? The statement by Lewis Gordon, saying that the Caribbean region, given its smallness and vulnerability, has been on the receiving end of the momentous events that characterize this age. Hence, the Caribbean is an invention. If the Caribbean is at the receiving end of events, how can Caribbean people have any thought or become meaningful actors and creators in their own history and the history of the world? How does the church and faith or religious consciousness within the Caribbean affect the work of activists to end period poverty? That's another question to consider. Shirley Ann Reid suggested in her interview that the church and ideas about sexual identity and masculinity affected her work to end period poverty due to cultural views surrounding what girls and boys can talk about and how they could relate and how they should relate. There is actually a recording, a video podcast that I did with Shirley Ann Meeks, which I probably am going to redo and make available for you guys to watch. The Caribbean is made up of largely dependent capitalist states. But since the explosion of information and globalization, more countries are becoming more modern and has transplanted their dependency. Is this an accurate socioeconomic analysis of the Caribbean? And what are the factors and forces responsible for this transformation? Okay, that's a question to consider for this class. The Negro is not any more than the white man. What is your reading of this by Fanon, and how has the black and brown people's realization of the nation expressed by this? If the world is in a constant state of tension between peoples and places, then what value can we give to any equitable balance, since society is ordered within class and racial struggle that is always at odds with the other? Another point to consider: the law is not a shackle. How would you approach what former Prime Minister of Jamaica, P.J. Patterson is asserting here in his statement to Parliament in 1998. Again, I don't know if it was in 1990. It could be 1993. I don't think it was in 1998. I think it was early. I think it was in 1993. The law is not a shackle, but I'll have to check that. Or it could be 1998. How would you approach what former Prime Minister of Jamaica, P.J. Patterson, said? We are not capitalists or communists. Rasta is our religion. Bob Marley in Who Shot the Sheriff reimagines and reinvent the black man as the consummate antagonist, opposing the polarities of capitalism and communism. Again, we are not capitalists or communists. Rasta is our religion. That's according to Bob Marley in Who Shot the Sheriff, who is here reimagining and reinventing the black man as the consummate antagonist, opposing the polarities of capitalism and communism, concluding that they subscribe to a consciousness within themselves that envisions Rasta as the ultimate, Rastafari, the embodiment of the Black Jesus, a hero like that of the Archaeans, Achilles, or the Muslims, Emmanuel. What is Bob Marley getting at here when he says Rasta is our religion, moving from economics to a personal or a people's religion? Very important point. Compare a SWOT, complete a SWOT analysis of the Caribbean or Jamaica. What vision or goals can you create from your analysis of SWOT of Jamaica, the Caribbean? How far must we go when studying the Caribbean? And of course, I probably alluded to that in part of the discussion. But how far must we go when studying the Caribbean? Brian Meeks started his work in 1983. Okay, I would go even further. Okay, I would start from the Iliad. The Iliad was written by Homer, or said to have been written by Homer, talking about Achilles and the gods and so on and so forth. That love story, or sorry, that war story. What resemblance does family bears with? Does the family, the Caribbean family, what resemblance does the Caribbean family bears with its British antecedents? And did the African ancestors have any form of family that included any structure that influenced Europeans? This is a very important question, you know. What resemblance does family bears with its British antecedents? And did the African ancestors have any form of family that included any structure that influenced Europeans? Why am I asking that question? A very important question, because we are led to believe that African families never had a family structure, a tight unit, or it was confusing and conflicting and cohabiting and non-consenting and so on and so forth. But where we get that from? But you know, when you read Edith Clarke, My Mother Who Fathered Me, and Rex Nettleford in the foreword, you would get that feeling as they try to explain why some communities exhibit certain behaviors, or why certain communities are organized. Their conception of the family is one that is different from other parts of the country. That is not European, that's not British, with a mother and a father or nuclear family. The embrace of the nuclear family is not, it's more extended. What's going on there? And of course, part of the explanation, part of the explanation is that it's because many of it stems from their African tradition, as if African traditions are concept of the family is loosely based on some conflicting, confusing organization. And I say to you, not necessarily the case, because when you look at some of the slaves coming from Senegal, Gambia, like Dottie Bookman, They were religious, and they read the Quran, and they were guided by the Quran and by family, the kind of family that existed even in Europe, in some European cultures. So it was not fair to say that African unions or African traditions, their family, it was not nuclear, or it wasn't organized in a certain way. It was more conflicting and confusing, based on concubinage and illegitimate, inherited from Africa. Did Edith Clark do a study of Africans before slavery that provided any lenses on their family which resembled the of Caribbean peoples? Was there any structure in African life that was disrupted by European influence? What basis do we have to define African family life in some communities and African experience to say Africans practice a form of illegitimacy when that was not the experience? For Africans had religion, culture, and family life that acknowledged the man and woman as integral to raising the children. Some Africans practiced a form of Christianity that valued monogamy. Africans cannot be understood as one people, but were in themselves tribal, with separate beliefs and identities that cannot be compared as a whole with its African diaspora. And sometimes when people start to study Africa, they study the people as a whole, when actually that may be wrong. So what credence can we give to family or sociological studies that explain Caribbean behaviors from an African history taken within the whole? And finally, it is said that to study Caribbean thought is to explore Caribbean within a civilization that has come to be known as the Western civilization. The Caribbean, as part of a new world, within that civilization, therefore, has connections that have influenced its ideology, practices, present realities, and possibly future. So therefore, to study the Caribbean must begin with a study of the foundations of knowledge and the hegemony of faith. So how accurate is this assessment about the Caribbean's place in the world and fate in the future? Finally, the course requires that the student understands that his or her thinking will be challenged as a way to begin critically, to begin critical thinking, or to think critically, to begin to think critically. Again, let me say that again. The course requires that the student understand that his or her thinking will be challenged as a way to begin to think critically about and building on academic concepts that is geared towards serving the world today to solve tomorrow's challenges. The student will utilize 21st century trends and thinking to update his learning and how it is formulated and presented. So the students, you may use social media platforms and other digital and social technology with verifiable credibility to support your arguments and presentations, since we now live in the information and tectonic age that transcends how we interpret, receive, and send information. The Caribbean must also get with the times, and learning cannot be devoid of this experience in current reality. And that's the end of the syllabus. And on the syllabus, there's an addendum to the course. You guys can read that addendum. I won't go into it. You guys can read the addendum. There's an attachment. Talks about the lecturer. There's a poll question, and so on and so forth. But I think that's about it. And I will stop my screen share. And just so you know, I had a lecture prepared for you guys. It's entitled, where is it? Here we go. 1 second, just before you guys go. Share my screen. I'm going to share my screen just one last time here. we should have. This is what I wanted to do with you guys today. But what for next week we will do this. We will begin this lecture next week. Caribbean Thought Lecture 2024 Semester 2. Topic lecture on conceptualizing the course. We're going to be looking at critical thinking and its importance to the study of the Caribbean. Critical thinking and its importance to the study of the Caribbean. These are the questions to consider for next week's class. 1. What is the Caribbean and what is the socio-economic context? The Caribbean is an invention of the 20th century. And of course, we're talking about dependency. The words that come to mind when we talk about Caribbean: dependency, uncompetitive, developing, paradise, poverty, black and brown, penetratable. 2. Where is the Caribbean? Where is the Caribbean? And are the Caribbean peoples American? We said the Caribbean is part of the New World. See, what is critical thinking and how is it important to the study of Caribbean thought? That is where we will zero in on. We'll take up much of the time next week on that. Of course, we said that the Caribbean as an invention. That is very vital. The Caribbean as an invention, very important. And I said, it's Norman Gervin who said that in the Caribbean Reader, but the Caribbean Reader was edited by Brian Meeks, but Norman Gervin was contributing to a chapter and defined the Caribbean as that. That definition comes from him thinking critically about Caribbean. Okay? And finally, do we have any urban Indian heritages in the Caribbean which challenges our African thought? And of course, we can begin by looking at, have we misunderstood our heritage in Jamaica? So we will begin. It's an 8-page lecture topic which is already available. But I will teach from this next week, and and there are some links. I will also bring up some of the links for class next week, and I will I will try to redo every week. I will try and remind you guys about the research that we're doing. So we'll pick up next week, and we will begin by looking at conceptualizing the course, critical thinking and its importance to the study of the Caribbean. Okay? And that is where we will end class today, guys. Thank you so much. Any question or final thought before we wrap up? That's it? Alright. Now, just so you know, lecture 1, the first lecture that we did, is available if you go to the my YouTube channel and go to Caribbean Thought. But I think it's available. If you go to my YouTube channel, it is available. The one that we did last week, and I created a new playlist. It's called Caribbean Thought 2024, and that's the first lecture that's up there. So the one that we did on the first week is available. You guys want to review this? This is going to be available before next week's class. And so there is one lecture last week that we did that's not available, and this one, these two will be available. The first one is available right now. It's available on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and also on my YouTube channel. It's available. You can subscribe, and you can to the link and so on and so forth. Thank you guys so much, and I hope you guys have a great weekend. And I pray that God will continue to bless you and keep you, and that you will have an amazing time with me in this class. All right? Take care.
Bye, friend.
Thank you. Same to you.
Same to you.